Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I'm Nick, here with you as always, and thanks for joining us for episode number 72 of our whiskey reviews. So next up on our greatest hits is Four Roses, and we'll start out with the yellow label, the traditional standard entry-level bottling from Four Roses. Now, Four Roses, it dates back to the 1800s and has changed hands several times. We'll give you the short and narrow. Basically, Four Roses was the epitome of everything bourbon in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. It was one of the first bourbons or first companies, whiskey companies rather, that had a sign in Times Square. Way back then, neon sign probably. And so 20s, 30s, and 40s were a real big time for Four Roses. Now, 1950s, 1960s came around. The ownership, they decided that they were trying to get Four Roses into the global market. You know, it's that whole sense of wanting to expand, see how far you can get with something, see how much of a success it could be. But there's always a cost that comes along with it. So while the bottling that was being put out at the time, that was championed as like some of the best bourbon around, got changed to a blended whiskey, and they really started to focus on the export markets of Europe and Asia. And so during the 50s and 60s, that's a lot of where this went. So what that meant is the recipe that everybody came to know and love, the bourbon that everybody loved here in the States, became basically garbage. Like, you might as well be drinking motor oil at that point. That's how bad it was. So for a couple decades, Four Roses had this, stigma against it, that it was this rock gut, this just garbage, low-end, bottom-of-the-barrel whiskey that nobody wanted. Well, the ownership changed around, the times always change. People started to get invested back into whiskey, bourbons in particular, and the ownership, I believe it was Seagram's at the time, brought it back to offer no more of the blended whiskeys, but they're going to stick with these straight whiskeys, which are out now. So, recently retired Jim Rutledge really had such an important hand in the making of Four Roses and the betterment, really, of the whole bourbon industry. One of the things that really sets Four Roses apart is the fact that it has basically 10 different recipes. Now, it has 2 different mash bills that it works with for all of its traditional 3 range of whiskeys, which include the yellow label, the single barrel, and then the small batch. So you've got, for those 3, there's 10 main recipes. So 2 mash bills. One, I had to write it down in here, is got basically a higher rye than the other. So the first one, which is 75% corn, and then 20% rye, 5% malted barley. That's the E code of the mash bill. If you can look up the codes for all 3 of their whiskey, their standard whiskeys. And then if you get a B for the mash bill, which is the second of the 2, that's a 60% corn, 35% rye, and 5% malted barley. So there you go. And then the third code, the third letter of the 4-letter code is the S. It just denotes it as a straight whiskey. And then you have the yeast, 5 different yeasts, and they basically just have different flavor profiles. I'm not going to go into all of that because I think, whiskey is subjective to what you taste anyway. But it's the fact that they have all of these yeast strains and 2 different mash bills that they work with that create unique combinations. And so what you're getting between those 3 whiskeys from Four Roses is completely different. It's not, oh, it's aged a little bit longer, oh, it's a smaller batch, oh, it's been finished in this or that. That's not the case. They're using completely different recipes. So, and a mix of those as well. Now, the yellow label, it's got every single possible combination of those. So they've got 10 of those recipes. You think of the 4-letter code in there. And then the O, which I forgot to say in the beginning, is the first letter in the whole code, which just means it's produced at the Four Roses distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. So, let's get into the whiskey. We got all this hype now into bringing it back and making it such a great thing. So let's go in and see what we've got for our, I believe, $19.99 whiskey. I tell you, at first, you don't get a real strong sense of anything. You get a little hint of this floral note, a little hint of vanilla, and a little bit of charred oak. Slight bit of caramel in there, but really light. All of these aromas that are coming through are very faint and very pale aromas. Now, I'm not sure of the age on this. It's a straight Kentucky bourbon, so we know that it's aged at least 2 years. We also know that there's no age statement on here, and so it could be a straight whiskey and aged less than 4 years, and it would have to have the age of the youngest whiskey in it on here, which it's not on this bottle. So that makes me want to say that it's older than 4 years old. But I'm not sure exactly how old it is. And I don't see a lot of advertising, it's like Maker's Mark will be like, well, it's ready when it's ready. They go by taste, which is, how should we? So, anyway, let's go in. First things that I pull off of it, a little bit of wood. The wood tannins, definitely some charred oak. A little bit of caramel, just a hint, like we got on the nose, but not overly powering at all. A little bit of spice in there. Like a little black pepper, a little bit of nutmeg sprinkled on in there. I gotta say though, not an overly long-lasting finish on this. It goes in, you get a little bit of these notes, flavors here and there, and then it's gone. It really doesn't stick around for a while, which is unfortunate. And again, I don't think I said it, but bottled at 40% ABV, there's not a lot of places that this can go. I'm surprised that something like this isn't bottled at a 43 at least. 45 would be even nicer. It's not that hard. They're making a lot of money. So I wish they could do it, because this could really use the help. Now let's put things in perspective. Okay, this is a $20 whiskey. It's on par with the Jack Daniels. You can probably get Evan Williams a little bit cheaper. George Dickel, Jim Beam, that kind of thing. To get in Makers is a little bit more expensive. I've seen like the $24 mark. Same with Knob Creek. Some Woodford Reserve is going to get you up a little bit higher, a few dollar wise. So we're sticking in the area of the 20 sub $20 dollar category. So we have to keep that in mind when we're tasting this. Again, there's not much. You really have to be so focused in to what you're doing and block out all the noises and everything else, really, just to concentrate on picking apart the notes of this whiskey, because they really do not last that long, which is kind of annoying. I'm almost tempted to, because we showed this decanter in the last episode last week. It's got Jack Daniels in it, but this will hold, I believe it's 1,000 milliliters, so you still could put another, or no, it holds 2 750 milliliter bottles. So we could put this in there, which I'm almost tempted to do. Put Jack Daniels and Four Roses together. Then we can bring it back to the old blended whiskey days of the 50s and 60s. I guess that's not really going in the right direction that we want, so anyway, before we finish up and give a score here, I do want to say though that last year I went to basically an American whiskey festival here, and basically when you got in, you got a little chip, almost like a poker chip, and so you went out around to all the distilleries table during the night, and then you're supposed to put your chip wherever you had the best whiskey, wherever, you know, the overall experience, taste, you know, presentation, marketing, customer service, that sort of thing, but which was the best. And I gotta say, I put my chip down on Four Roses, but it wasn't obviously the yellow label. It was the single barrel, which I need to get my hands on and review, because that was absolutely phenomenal. Out of everything there, all the American whiskey and bourbon there that night, that was so delicious. So you're not gonna be overly jumping for joy at my score for this one, but just wait and we'll get to the other Four Roses ones, because I feel like they definitely had a purpose for this. And yeah, so we'll get to that. So for a score, the cap's already off, Christ. We're going, cap, the Four Roses yellow label, a 79 out of 100. Told you it wasn't going to be nice, but it is what it is. That being said though, before we go, it is a good idea if you're looking to mix your whiskey with Coca-Cola or anything else, whatever else people add to it. I don't really mix these things a lot. So, but cocktails, anything like that, you may have some good luck with this. And if you're making it for a lot of people, even better, because it'll definitely give you some bang for your buck. So, that being said, for episode number 72, I've been Nick, and it's been a pleasure to have you. If you're going to drink, drink responsibly. And until next time, have a good one.